how to render literally anything. Let's go. So if you don't know me already, my name is Luigi. I went into an art transformation and learned a lot about painting, so now I'm here teaching it to you, passing it on to you. So after watching this video, you're gonna know how to render basically anything, and I'm gonna give you an example with this face right here, which I know this is kind of silly, but it kind of works for the purpose. You'll see how it works. So before teaching it how to render, which is gonna be like brain dead easy once you understand it the first time. Once it kind of clicks for you, it's like gonna be super easy. But first, we're gonna kind of talk about what is actually rendering, because rendering is not like normal painting. Rendering is actually like adding details and kind of polishing, refining the shapes, and you know what that you painted already. So let's say, like right away, what mindset, the type of mindset that I want you to have is on this type of like facial features, and this would include kind of like noses. Especially, I want to focus on noses. So right away, the mindset that I have whenever I'm rendering a face is that I go by parts. I don't render the whole face all at once, because that's not how it works, right? I do it like I first go and render the forehead, for example, then I would go and render the nose. Like I would go individually on each part so I can do it in order. And that's how I do it. Like at the beginning, I would start kind of mapping the entire face and with shapes and value and all of that. But then when it comes to the rendering, I will individually render each part. So I want to start with the nose, for instance. The nose is my favorite part. Why? Because it kind of looks like a sphere. It has like a very spherical shape. So here's the interesting part. If you want to learn to paint a nose, the only thing that you really have to learn is to paint like a sphere. So I'm gonna set this layer, in black and white, just so it's easier, just so the color's not here throwing you off. You can still render in black and white. Color has nothing to do with rendering at all. So if you're having trouble kind of rendering, I suggest you turn everything in black and white. So it's just easier and it's not, again, throwing you off. So let's pretend here that I'm going to paint the nose, that I'm going to be rendering the nose. So the way I would do it is just by making like a sphere. Because again, we have like this spherical shape. And it's not because of the shape itself, right? The shape doesn't really matter, but it's because of the way it reflects light. So you have to know how to draw a sphere, basically, how to paint one and how to render a sphere. So what we're going to do for the sphere is we're going to start with the dark value. Like it depends on how darker is the darkest value on the photo, right? So we're going to start with the dark value, and then we're going to move into the lightest value, but very subtle. We don't want to have like very hard transitions like this. No, we want to go very subtle, and we want to progressively just get the highlights and get brighter. By the way, I'm using a round brush for this. I'm using a round brush with opacity. You don't need a super fancy brush for doing this. You can render with any brush. I recommend you use this brush because it's the one that I use and it's the simple brush to use, right? And so here you're gonna do like the highlights and stuff, and you can see how easy, how quick you can render like a sphere, right? And you can then add more highlights if you want, and keep blending those. So it can be tricky to even blend or render spheres, but if you can get good at this, you can get good at this as well. So it's kind of like I just rendered a nose here. You can kind of see the resemblance. Like the bodies are probably not super accurate, but we can make it a little lighter, a little more subtle, maybe. Like this. Let's say this is our nose. And you know what the cool part is? Well, I'm doing all this in real time though, so you don't blink and miss it. But this is basically, yeah, this could be a nose. So we can, blend this part of the sphere. So now it's not spherical. Now it has like a nose type of shape. And this is how you approach it, basically. This can be a nose easily. So you know, then you can add dark shadow here, whatever. So yeah, this is how you would paint without a sketch, by the way, without like right away. You probably seen people. I've done this before. You've probably seen people painting without making a sketch or anything, just without any sort of planning. This is how you do it. This is how you do it. You focus on, or at least the way I do it is that I think of everything like if it was a sphere, basically. So here you have like the bridge of the nose, which is not quite a sphere, right? It's not quite a sphere as a spherical as the nose itself. If we kind of, if we kind of circle it, the nose is very spherical, but this area is more like cylindrical. Which again, if you know how to paint like a sphere, you know how to paint a cylinder. So you know you should have no issues whatsoever with doing this. Okay, but now you might be asking, okay, but what if I want to paint the forehead, for example? How does it like apply to that? Yep, we can extrapolate this also to the forehead, because in this case the forehead is hella big and it's also like roundish, and it kind of reflects the light in a similar way to the nose or to a sphere. So I want you to have this mindset that there is like a sphere, like kind of caught in this shape, like just like the way I highlighted it here. Like, you know, you can just draw like a circle in your mind. Okay, this is now a sphere. You know, I can focus on painting a sphere instead of painting a forehead. Okay, so you're not thinking of painting a forehead. You're just thinking of painting like a dumb sphere, whatever. Okay, but what if I want to paint the eyes? It's the same thing, especially the eyes. Like it's kind of more subtle, but it's also a sphere. Like the eyes are literally quite spherical. What about the lips? Okay, the lips. What I do is kind of break it down in like two shapes. So it would be like a cylinder here, and you know you would treat it the same way as a cylinder, the same way here. Like you can break it down kind of like in two here, whatever, however you want it. The same thing with this area of the nose, or even the cheekbones. Like this area could also be like a cylinder too. And so the same thing with you know, this part of the eye, the ears, and also even the hair. It's not only like skin, surface. You know, this is works for basically every surface, like clothing, hair. The only difference in between skin and hair, for example, or if you're painting metal or something, is that it's just gonna reflect light in a different way. So metal is going to reflect light in a more dramatic way, if you will. It's just going to be more contrast. However, you know, skin has like a little bit of texture and stuff. So you also don't want it to be super soft, right? Because you can paint a sphere like this. You can use the airbrush and you can have like, you can do like a very subtle gradient like this. But you don't really want this, okay? You don't really want to have a gradient like this when you're painting skin, because skin doesn't really look like this. Skin doesn't reflect light this way, but it's more like this way, that it has a little bit of texture and harder gradients and kind of shapes. Like you can see edges. I'm sorry, you can see here how it has like this kind of edge here and here. So it's not completely smooth and perfect. It's also the same thing for the chin here. The only difference in between like the chin and the nose, again, is the way they reflect light, because the chin is kind of a little bit more subtle, and it's the light is kind of more spread out, so it's not like focused on like this little spot here. So you'll have like a more subtle, probably like would be more like this. It would be more like this. Like this would be more like the chin. If we were gonna do it in like a sphere fashion, right? So this would be like the chin, right? Something like this. And so let me tell you something. If you're struggling with rendering specifically, 100% you are not doing enough spheres, okay? If you start doing more spheres right now, you know, now that I kind of explained the importance of it, you will improve. But you have to do it with this mindset that this is going to help you render this type of shapes and facial features, for instance, in this case. I'm of course, as always, focusing this on kind of like people and portraits because that's what I like painting personally. So it is a good thing that you practice painting spheres. All right, from imagination. It's not complicated. Like saying from imagination always, seems kind of scary, but it's not really that difficult. After a few times, like if you practice doing this for like a few days, you're gonna get good at it. Something has to kind of click in your mind, and then it's like, okay, now I can paint absolutely anything, basically. So once you can do like a sphere like this is, by the way, how you paint from imagination, because a bunch of people on my comment section will kind of asking me if how do you paint from imagination, how does this apply to like painting from memory and all of that. You got to get good at this, basically. You got to get good at creating form and like this, and this is extremely easy, by the way, as well. This is why every single like art school and stuff always like tell you to practice this. However, like what is kind of annoying is that they don't tell you the importance or why this is so important to practice these spheres, right? They just tell you mindlessly practice painting spheres, but they don't ever tell you why. Well, this is why. This is basically why. It's how rendering works, how creating volume works. So this is basically how you get good at painting from memory, and overall how you get better at painting the details, because what we're doing when we're rendering is basically just adding more details. Okay, this is what details look like in a practical setting, right? This is what adding detail looks like. So let me give you another quick example. So here I have a bunch of photos that I found on Pinterest. Let me just I'm gonna turn this into black and white again, so we're not being thrown off by the colors and stuff. Of course, you want to learn to do this whilst looking at the colors and kind of knowing or understanding the value and stuff. But if you feel like that's too complicated, you can always use like a black and white filter, and that will take like that big step away from the equation. So it's the exact same way here. Like I would say, okay, this would also be like all spheres. This would be like a big sphere as well. Damn it. So this would be like a sphere here on this area of the nose. Also this would be a sphere. Like if you compare like this area, for instance, like let's say, okay, this is a sphere and this is also a sphere. What is the difference in between these two? Because they're both spheres. They could both reflect light in the same way. But the difference is that the light here is like more, it reflects more light. The nose, what I like about painting the nose is that you can go a little crazy with the highlights. You can add almost like pure white, because the nose is very reflective and you can get away with it. And here, like the area is not as reflective. Like you might have a bit of reflection on this area, especially if it's like moist. But yeah, it's usually going to be more subtle, and it's the same thing with the rest of the skin. This area right here is also going to be like very reflective, so you might want to add like a highlight like this in your painting. And this too, like this is the most obvious one right here. You can just, this is just a basic sphere. This is like the easiest thing to draw, by the way, to paint. So how do we paint a nose like this? Well, it's very easy. We just make our little sphere, and we start. Like if we see the light is here, the highlight is kind of here in this area. We're going to focus the area. Again, we want to be very subtle, by the way. As I said, you don't want to go like full on contrast, because that's a very common mistake a lot of beginner artists tend to make. That is just going crazy with the contrast. And the more subtle you can be with this, with your values and your transitions, the better, honestly. And so, yeah, here. It's looking a little weird. Oops, I got. You can use blending. And progressively start like adding more and more highlights. Again, you don't want to have everything, because we're painting skin. Not everything has to be fully blended, okay? We can have a bunch of edges, and that will be completely fine. That's also gonna make it a lot more painful if we have like some visible brush strokes as well. So you don't want every single thing to be super blended and smoothed out. Uh, so we're kind of getting closer here. Maybe we can make this a little brighter. And you also want to use like big uh brushes for this. You want to use like a big brush. You don't want to use like tiny brushes because that is going to make your brush strokes look a lot worse. A lot less aesthetic, if you will. So you can even go kind of play around with the shapes. You can use like actual shapes. You can play around with this as much as you wish. You can use like no opacity if you want. You can use only hard edges. Like you can do basically anything with the sphere. So I know I know spheres can be a bit of a boring exercise sometimes, you know. I don't like telling people to, practice spheres too much, even though it's super helpful, because it's just not super amusing to just do the sphere. So, it's kind of okay, practice your spheres, also, do your studies and all of this, but keep in mind that this, if you want to level up your rendering, you absolutely have to do this exercise. Yeah, whatever, but basic nose shape. And here you can add like almost pure white as a highlight, and it's usually going to look all right. Yeah, that's right. Okay, and then we have like this is the same thing here. The value range is a little like you have more like darker values here, but it's the exact same thing. Exact same thing, yeah. So the light is the highlights on the light values are here, like on this kind of area. So I'm gonna progressively keep adding a little bit more highlights, basically. And they're gonna get smaller. So I'm also going from big to small shapes. You want to go dark to light, big to small, okay? You don't want to ever do it the other way around because that's gonna be insufferable. It's gonna be just way too hard and unpractical, right? You don't want that. So yeah, hopefully after watching this video, painting spheres, like this completely changes your mind on painting spheres. Now it's no longer like a super boring exercise anymore. Now it's a little bit more has a little bit more value, you know. Yeah, again, same thing. This applies to anything, absolutely anything that has three-dimensional form. Like you want to render it like this, you want to approach it just like this. This is how you render. Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's all. Now let's make an actual painting. Let's see what we've learned from this, and let's apply it into a real world, into an actual painting. So let's do that. Okay, so I'm going to warm up here with a little photo study, and I chose this reference because it had like this nice highlight on the cheek, this face portrait. So basically, the whole face, approaching it as a sphere, especially like the face area from above the neck, is basically a sphere. I have like drawn the sphere on my mind, and that's what I'm focusing on rendering specifically. And yeah, I'm just warming up here. I'm not going to fully add a whole ton of detail, also because I'm just it's just a little thumbnail, and there's only so much detail I can add from like this far away. So yeah, I'm applying all the concepts of a sphere. This is just like a very complicated sphere, and I'm also adding color, which again can be a little bit challenging to also balance the color whenever you're rendering. So yeah,
Made sure to have the super bright highlight there. It's probably pure white, honestly. And you can absolutely get away with it. And it's usually going to look better. It's going to have more depth. It's going to look better. And I'm also trying to add some interesting colors, like exaggerate a little bit of the hues and the colors that I see. So here, now I'm starting to do like an actual painting. And I'm also doing the thumbnail thing that I did earlier. And this is, by the way, like I like to separate the painting in two stages. And this is like the first stage. This is a stage where everything is just small. Everything is just very simplified. All the shapes. There's not a whole lot of detail going on. And here I started to render them. There's like a chunk of the time lapse that got damaged or something. But basically, here I started to do the actual rendering, and I started to focus. And here's the thing, right? This is kind of important because the way that I do the rendering specifically is different than the way that I do the sketching and the thumbnails. So here I'm specifically tackling isolated areas like the nose, and from that point, once it's rendered, I use that as a reference to paint the rest and the values that are kind of, next to the nose and stuff. And yeah, I'm treating the nose as a sphere again. I think it's kind of obvious, and well, probably not obvious, but you can clearly see how it looks like a sphere. And it's the same thing, especially like on like the cheek area as well, and the chin too. Everything, if it's not a sphere, it's a cylinder. So this is an extremely good mindset to have, and it is important that you like at this stage. I don't mind zooming in too much and starting to add a lot of blending, a lot of actual blending. I have like a specific blending brush that I use here. Again, I said you don't need any fancy brushes. You absolutely don't have to use a brush like the one I'm using, because this brush is more, to speed things up and make things a little bit more fancy, more finished. But the blending itself, I mostly do it with the round brush. Again, I'm also using the round brush. And here I'm just refining the shape, setting like, going over the colors again. And the first stage, it was basically my way of sketching, right? So all the proportions are set because I did that 15-minute thumbnail. And now I don't have to adjust things too much because, all the proportions are looking good. And the same thing with most of the colors and the values. So I'm mostly here just polishing the face and even liquefying a little bit. There's nothing wrong with liquefying. If you feel like your proportions are looking a little bit off, you can always adjust them back. And yeah, I'm here going into the very smaller, way smaller details and all of this. I was planning to leave, like, you'll see how I left a lot of the areas very unfinished and very simplified. I like doing this. I like rendering, like, if I was going to render the face, I'm not going to give everything else the same level of detail, right? Because I don't want that to, like the rest, like the hands, for instance, to compete too much for focal attention with the face. So, if you see that the hands, for instance, are not very finished in the end, it's not because I got lazy, I promise. It's just because I didn't want too much focus into them. I wanted more the focus to be like on like the face area and all of that as well. So like left like the cap very simple and the background a little bit as well. And yeah, I was trying to exaggerate some of the colors and cranking up the saturation a little bit, and yeah, exaggerating the hue specifically. I love doing that. It's in specific areas I found that it looks very, very great if you do it properly. So yeah, I'm also not going like hyper realistic, but you absolutely can. Like, you can use like the airbrush in some areas, like especially like I know I told you not to use the airbrush on skin, but when you're painting like a face with makeup on, you will usually be better off painting with an airbrush if you want to achieve a more realistic result. because if you notice, like on the top left photo that I did the study, the thumbnail, it is very smooth and the transitions are way too soft. So if you want to again achieve a more realistic approach, you might want to use the airbrush. Like the problem with the airbrush is that it's very difficult to not abuse it when you are a beginner and you don't have a clear idea of how to blend and stuff. So here on the background, I'm trying to add a little bit of texture. I feel like I have been neglecting my texture a lot. I feel like I need to get more textures here and there, like to make things a little bit more interesting, less flat, I guess. So I'm trying to add some texture. I'm using both like a texture brush, and I'm also using like the round brush to sometimes when I want to create texture, I use very thin brush strokes, like with the round brush, and I just do like scribbles on the area that I want, like you're seeing me doing here, and that kind of works. It's creates an interesting look, especially if you notice, I kind of try to create a contrast with like the very texture areas and trying to add like very hard brush strokes as well. I feel like that creates like a weird contrast, but it looks kind of nice. So I'm not I'm still experimenting around with this type of styles and combining things. But yeah, basically rendering again is just adding highlights, but progressively, of course, because if you have like flat colors, you're not going to add the highlight, like the brightest highlight right away. You have to first add the midtones, and you have to like progressively go brighter. You can't just add the bright highlight straight away. That's nonsense. So you have to start with simple transitions, with very few transitions, which would be like the early stage, and then you want to clean those transitions, smooth them out, which would be the blending stage or the rendering. They are kind of work with each other, right? Blending is not necessarily rendering, but when you blend, like when you're creating form and you're blending you're smoothing the transitions and everything, that really makes things a lot more finished. So yeah, we can say that is like a way of rendering. But you can also render without even blending. Honestly, it just takes a little bit more work, and really depends on your style and whatever you're trying to aim for here. So again, yeah, I left a lot of areas unfinished, like some areas here on the hair. I didn't go to hard on the hair, like to render. Like you can see like brush strokes and all of that. Like I tried to balance that. I tried to get a lot of detail in certain areas, but also simplify some others. And I feel like he creates a very interesting contrast. Yeah. So yeah, I prefer more like that type of abstraction on the hands. Okay, again, looks kind of interesting. And so yeah, this is basically about it. This is how you render a face. Here you can see the final result. And basically, like I know it might look a little complicated, but what I'm just doing, I'm just painting spheres and kind of combining them with each other to create like the volume of a face, or like to create the right amount of depth and value and all of that. Also, if you like this type of videos and long format video classes and this type of art tutorials, well, I have a Discord community, and when you join, you basically get access to a bunch of long video classes like this, where I break things down in very specific steps that you can follow, so you don't get confused in like how to approach art. And you also get to do personal coaching sessions with me. So I basically review your art in real time, and I get to do like a full-on breakdown, just like I did on this video with this topic specifically with rendering. And I get to give you feedback. So if you want me to take you by the hand and help you grow as an artist, you can check the link in the description, and I'll see you there. See you in the next video. Goodbye.